Help Wanted 2 is finally here, and I streamed it for like a full day and got as many secrets as I could find. Now let's do a summary, shall we? I figured the best thing to do for a video this early is to fully cover the entire plot and lore of the game, and then go into some light speculation. If you've seen my Ruin video, you'll know what I mean by that when we get to it. But slices, put on your aprons, and let's review some Peak, and I mean Peak. The game's only been out for like a day or two, but it's easily already my favorite FNAF game of all time. Oh, and obviously, spoiler warning ahead. In the opening cutscene, we're in a Fazbear employee orientation that has new audio but uses the same exact slides from FNAF 6. And that makes a lot of sense since once we get into the game, the hub for this game is the FNAF 6 pizzeria. Granted, there's been things added to it, but that definitely is the same location. We're playing as, well, that's not necessarily clear and we'll get into it in the speculation portion. We do, however, know that whoever we're playing as is the last human employee at the Pizzaplex. At least that's what the blog post from PlayStation and the head chef bot says.
Welcome to your new career in food service. It is a task so simple a human can do it.
But the twist is, halfway through the game we get the Faz Wrench, that tool from Ruin that lets you do these wire puzzles. And if you do the wire puzzle that's in the corner of the hub room, you get access to the back room, where there's a Princess Quest 4 machine and an inhibitor that in Ruin would not let you take off your mask. Once you turn it off, Once you turn that off, you're able to realize you've been wearing the VANNI mask, or Vanny mask. This tool from Ruin allowed you to access the AR world and see things that weren't there. So now that we're not wearing it, we get to see what the hub world actually looks like. And it's still the FNAF 6 pizzeria, but it's a lot closer to what we see in Security Breach, even with that hole. It's totaled, but notably, it's not falling apart as it would have been in Ruin. Another addition to this hub world now is Candy Cadet in the corner. If you've collected all the coins in the game, you get 2 stories. I have not collected all the coins in the game and there's no guide yet. But luckily, Mamakato on YouTube uploaded all the voice lines for Candy Cadet, so you can listen to them there, link in the description. Of the 2 stories, I'm wagering to bet that the first story is more filler than anything else. It tells of a family who missed out on the best opportunity in their lives, a $50 meal deal with a huge pizza, sides, and a toy. And then when they didn't buy it, they all died. Now, you could argue this is some kind of metaphor, but granted, keep in mind, this story takes like 3 or 4 coins to get. And when you first boot up the game, there are 3 or 4 coins scattered throughout the hub area. I think Steel Wool wanted to teach the player that we still would be collecting coins, but didn't want to reward us for doing basic looking around. Essentially, if you're going around the hub world, you see these very out in the open coins, which pretty much give you the full first story and then a snippet of the second story. I think that's Steel Wool's way of being like, hey, if you collect coins, you're going to get a really cool story, but you gotta work for the lore relevant one. That's my guess anyway. Mainly because the second story feels very lore relevant. It tells of a girl who followed a mysterious voice into the woods and was tricked by a witch. She gets away, but she's forever scarred. Later, she returns with the boy to then challenge that witch and get revenge. But she goes to sleep and says, I'll get the witch in the morning. Then the story ends with the oven door shutting, the witch finally getting her meal. This can be interpreted in a lot of ways. And whatever way you interpret it will definitely be speculation, but I'm afraid I'm going to forget to mention it later on in the video, so allow me to indulge in some light speculation going over this story. The main 2 ways I can see the story being explained is with Vanessa or Cassie. Hey, it's Editor Riley. It's like 4:30 a.m. I'm trying to get this video out. Anyway, upon editing this video, realized that I totally misinterpreted that story and that it still could be applied to either Vanessa or Cassie or even Michael Afton. Casey just shook the camera. Sorry about that. Are you literally? Bro. I missed a major part of the Candy Cadet story. Again, listen to the whole story if you want to hear it in the description. But the boy that she goes back in the woods with is a trap. She meets the boy at the front of the woods and he's like, oh, I'll help you find the witch. And he's the one that says to rest. Like, they go through the woods together, he leads her through the woods and he's like, hey, here's a house so you can rest and defeat the witch in the morning. And she's like, you're right, I should rest. And then the witch's oven door shuts. So yes, she's led astray by a voice as a girl, but when she goes back, she's led astray specifically by a boy, which feels like it could go still either to Vanessa and Cassie. Honestly, it feels like it's both, because Cassie makes sense for the second half of that story where she's led astray by a boy going into the woods and then gets trapped, which is literally just ruin, right? Like Cassie follows Gregory into the Pizzaplex and then gets trapped in the basement. But if we're going that way, the story doesn't track for Cassie going back for revenge, right? Like she was just going solely to go for Gregory. So the first half of the story doesn't make much sense for her. And with Vanessa, the first half of the story makes a lot of sense. We're like led astray by a voice and gets out, but is scarred. And that's her being led astray by Glitchtrap, and she gets out of Help Wanted, but part of her is now Vanny. So it feels like the first half is Vanessa and the second half is Cassie. I don't know. Those are just my first thoughts. But I was editing the video and I realized that since I misinterpreted the story so heavily, I just could not salvage that part of the video. It was just so wrong. Anyway, excuse the Snuggie. Enjoy the rest of the video. Again, it's still up to interpretation what this story means, and some people have even argued that it's actually about Michael Afton, so take it with a grain of salt, and it's worth looking into. A couple other things I want to mention about this hub room before moving on. For some reason, Glamrock Chica's hand is on the stage. I was looking at it and at first I was like, oh, it's Glamrock Bonnie because it's kind of purple, but Bonnie doesn't have those colored gloves, and his fingers are blue, very clearly blue. You look at this and it's like a whitish purple with green gloves. The closest hand I could match it to is Glamrock Chica, which then begs the question, why was she down here at all? Glamrock Chica so far has had no real lore significance, she's just been around. Even more so, this is her right hand, and in her ruined form, she has her right hand. She's missing her left arm. But to be fair, she has her endoskeleton right hand, so this could just be the casing. Regardless, what's going on with Chica that her hand is in here? And finally, in the corner of this room is a goddamn Nightmare Own plush. What the hell is the deal with it? This isn't the only one. There's another one hidden in that Princess Quest ending behind a column. I say that ending. We didn't get into it yet. I'll get into it when we're at that ending, but there's a Princess Quest ending with the Nightmare Own plush hidden behind a column. So like, what do they mean? Anyway, onto the lore that we get from the actual minigames. In Food Prep, we don't get that much lore, but it's worth noting that we only ever see Shattered Chica. We do not get all the way to Ruined Chica. Furthermore, we do get this very clean shot of the atrium, which to me tells us that at least part of this game is taking place during Security Breach. After all, it's not confirmed that the Security Breach Pizzaplex is completely burned down by the end of the game, because some endings that doesn't happen. However, it's definitely way worse than this by the time of Ruin, so we're at least taking place during or after Security Breach. In Backstage, we learn a few things. One, whoever we're playing as is the reason Roxy looks different from Security Breach to Ruin. This was not a design retcon. This was intentional. At some point, we go to Roxy and she begs us to fix her to make her look beautiful. But after 3 attempts, she gives up. She doesn't want us to try anymore. Nothing's working. So she just demands that we give her the mask. And lo and behold, that's that weird endoskeleton face that she has in Ruin. Really quick aside, I think we need to take a step back as a community and stop throwing around the word retcon so readily. For the past couple years, anytime something hasn't made sense with something previous, we've all just kind of assumed it's a retcon, but this is Five Nights at Freddy's. We've never had all the answers. I know I and many others saw Roxy in Ruin and assumed that her design was retconned so that it could be used with a Faz wrench, but in actuality, we just didn't have all the answers yet. In fact, it was someone under the influence of Glitchtrap who put that mask on her in the first place. How many retcons that we currently believe exist are just that, questions that we don't have the answers to yet. So I'm going to personally try to make an effort to stop assuming things are retcons when they don't make sense, and I hope you'll do the same. Anyway, we also finally know who's in that hidden daycare area, and we have its official name. In Arts and Crafts Loft, we're in that hidden area, so this is the daycare loft. But we see that Sun hides in here, possibly to prevent Moon from coming out. After all, he does not want us in here. He doesn't want us in here at all. Several times he's like, get out. So this probably wasn't Gregory's hideout, or if it was, he was roommates with Sun Moon, which could make for a really cute fanfiction to have like GGY and Sun Moon hanging out. Also, according to the names of the models in the stage menu, we finally have direct confirmation that the daycare attendants' names are Sun and Moon. Not Sunny Drop and Moon Drop, not daycare attendant. Sun and Moon. It is stated directly in the menu, which is good timing because I'm working on a cookbook lore video, and in the cookbook, they're referred to as Sunny Drop and Moon Drop, so thank God the game cleared that up before we got there. And now maybe the cookbook isn't as lore accurate as I thought. Anyway, in FNAF Only, we learn of a few things. First, while Pigpatch and Lefty are shown during gameplay while we wear the mask, Scrap Baby isn't. We see Scrap Baby without wearing the mask at all. I really think that, plus the layout of this room and the fact that we're already in the FNAF 6 pizzeria, is really showing us that when we're practicing medical stuff on Helpy, we are in the FNAF 6 office that Michael is in during the gameplay of FNAF 6. After all, we've got the vents on either side, and granted this curtain is new, but I don't know, maybe we're facing backwards or something. But also, if this minigame is really happening, and so far we have no reason to believe it isn't, Scrap Baby is still around at least up until like mid-security breach, maybe after. And if Scrap Baby is still around, did Henry's fire not do anything? I don't know, it's really strange. That's gonna be a lot of theory stuff. Freddy also mentions that we're Fast Technician, but granted he can't see us. He literally says, and you're a Fast Technician, are you not? So he's guessing. However, we do get confirmation what this room in the Endomaze was used for. Specifically, it's teaching endoskeletons. Also giving us confirmation that the Glamrock endoskeletons are taught, not programmed. In other words, they're probably very similar, if not the same exact thing that the book mentions when they say that Fazbear created a whole line of mimic animatronics. They were trying to mass produce mimic endoskeletons that can just learn, not necessarily be programmed. In Fazcade, there's a few tidbits, including one of the biggest pieces of lore drops in the games. Now, take it with a grain of salt, because Carney could just be saying off pre-programmed lines. It's impossible to tell, but if it's true, this is huge. At some point several times in Fazerblast, Carney, this new animatronic, which we'll get into, says,
"Now, you look like you got kids.
What does that mean?
For the little one."
Am I Bonnie's or Cassie's dad?
And if we look like we have kids, presumably we'd be a parent. And there's like 3 parents in this franchise, and 2 of them are definitely dead. We'll get into that later. Bonkabon also has something important. In the hard mode version, not only do we hear Glitchtrap's voice when those creepy eyes show up in the holes, but in the bonus round, we literally see a puppet of Glitchtrap on a hand that looks like Glitchtrap come out. And when you hit it, that's when the whole tilt and code portion begins. Ticket Booth doesn't have much in the terms of lore, but it does raise some interesting questions. Namely, what the hell is this carousel? Realistically, it should have been in the daycare. Sun and Moon are the characters that are in it, but we never see a carousel in the daycare. Not only that, but there's the pumpkin, the lantern, and the hay bales, things that are usually at Fall Fest, the thing that we see in the Help Wanted 1 DLC and referenced a lot in Help Wanted 2. So if this carousel is from Fall Fest, not the daycare, then does that mean Sun and Moon are way older than we thought they were? And notably, one of the voice lines that Moon has is, "What makes you so special?" Which really makes you wonder who you're playing as. To me, initially, this read as a line of jealousy almost. At the time, I still thought we were playing as Vanessa, and we'll get into why I don't think so anymore. But when I thought that, this line read to me as jealousy. Essentially, Moon wanted to be Glitchtrap's servant, but Vanessa was chosen. What makes her so special? That's how it read at first to me, but honestly, the line could go a lot of ways. Captain Foxy's log ride doesn't give us a lot of lore, but it does show us this ride that was never fully open to the public. And finally, sister location. There is a lot here. First of all, the fact that we're going to the sister location bunker and sister location animatronics are here in an otherwise pretty real feeling game is insane, because we shouldn't be able to. At least not with roaming animatronics. After all, at the end of sister location, all of the animatronics shed their shell and become Ennard. But not only do we see Ennard, we see all the other animatronics, even Circus Baby. This shot of Circus Baby is the first time in the entire franchise that it's possible we're seeing actual Circus Baby do stuff. The only other time we've ever seen Circus Baby move in this entire franchise is this minigame and this Help Wanted minigame, which we know is a fake video game. Weirdness aside, as far as direct lore goes, there is a lot here. It's notable that one of the Office Night minigames, Office Puppet Master, has the subtitle, "This custom night is made just for you," implying that we're the Puppet Master. But the really packed one is Office Job Interview. This is where Circus Baby would like to play a game with you. You defend yourself against Scrap Babies 3 different times, and then Circus Baby herself shows up, offers you ice cream, which is the way that she kidnaps children, or the way she's programmed to anyway, but she doesn't. You just take the ice cream and eat it, and she says good job, essentially. And I want to point out a few things here. One, again, this is the exact way that she killed Elizabeth Afton, so that's gotta be notable. But second, this hand. Now, this could just be a gloved robotic hand meant to give out ice cream, and it probably is. At first, I thought this was Vanny's hand. After all, it's very fluid and it's wearing that white glove, but upon closer looking, the fingers don't match and the patch on the arm doesn't match either. In fact, the coloration matches Biddy Bab's pretty well, which makes sense. They're essentially an extension of Circus Baby. I don't think this is a Biddy Bab. Again, the fingers don't match. These fingers are very distinct. It's most likely this is just a gloved robotic hand, but I did want to put that out there. Also, notably, she has important voice lines as well. She also says, "What makes you so special?" And she mentioned that she likes being here. It makes her feel safe. Finally, this shows up in pretty much most minigames that have these TV screens. I know it shows up in the Endo Daycare as well, but occasionally, and you see it a lot in Sister Location, whenever these monitors flicker, sometimes it'll say they are watching in the flickering. Now onto the endings. On a normal playthrough, you unlock these Fazbots throughout the game. Occasionally, when you beat enough minigames, you unlock essentially a animatronic Fazbear Transformer doll. It's really cool, and you get this like 80s styled ad for all of them, which teases all four, two of their secret friends, and that they can all combine into one bot. And I don't have to tell you why all of the animatronics combining into one thing is a red flag and something we definitely need to look into. In case you're new here, because a new game came out and you actually don't know, several times in this franchise, like 5 souls combine into one, or 5 things combine into one. This is 6 technically, but it's still important to recognize, like, Volt and Freddy is literally all the Funtime animatronics merged into one. It's a big theme in this franchise. Eventually, you learn these 2 mysterious friends are Fredbear and the Puppet. When you unlock all of them, you also unlock the combined bot, and upon collecting it, you get the neutral ending. You're transported to the ruined pizzeria again, but this time there's a charging station on the stage, and Glitchtrap's hand comes out, going to open it. We then cut to several of the Nightmare staff bots pretty much surrounding and closing in on us, and then we cut to static, implying death. But we see the starting up screen, we see the beginning of security breach, this time for a staff bot. And through our eyes, we see Maskbot from Ruin, giving the VA and an eye mask, or Vanny mask, to Cassie, beginning that whole game. It's a really cool sequence, and also, we finally get a new updated model for Cassie, one that's meant to be seen by the player, and she looks really cute, and it's way better than the model that wasn't necessarily meant to be shown in Ruin, but was present. That is a crazy ending, but it's not the craziest. There are 2 endings in this game. The other ending involves that Princess Quest machine I mentioned, and a whole other side to this game that we didn't get into yet. Occasionally, when you beat a minigame, Mystic Hippo, whether or not you're playing on PSVR 2 or otherwise, will give you a hint. She'll mention there's some graffiti somewhere in the lobby, and it'll give you a hint into a minigame you just played. Now, Mystic Hippo is a queen and we love her, but these hints are incredibly cryptic at times, so I'm going to go through all of them for you just now in case that if you're playing on your own, this can serve as a guide on how to get these secrets. This graffiti I think is the most straightforward, but someone in chat still had to solve it for me because I couldn't figure it out. It's tilt Bonkabon backwards. Now, when you're playing Bonkabon in the hard mode and you get that tilt sequence, you have to punch in a code with wires. This hint is telling you, punch in that code backwards. And if you do, once it closes, Glitchtrap's hand comes out of one of the holes, presenting a voodoo doll, or something that looks, I keep saying voodoo doll. It kind of looks like a stereotypical voodoo doll. I don't know what it is. It's like a patchwork doll with a Bonnie mask. And once you collect it, notably, this is the only one that does this, as far as I'm aware, you get an achievement that says, "Remember Jeremy, collect a memory." That feels super important. This next graffiti is hinting to go back to the Sister Location office level with Ballora. If you do, and I did this on accident the first time, the drawer that's locked in Every Other Night is unlocked, allowing you to access the keypad from Custom Night of Sister Location. If you punch in that same code, 1983, it then gives you the puppet masked plushie, which has huge implications and could be implying that Charlie dies in 1983, which is interesting and something to think about. But regardless, that's cool. The next graffiti hints at shooting all of the rockets in Phaser Blast, specifically the one in the first, Western, and FNAF 1 levels. If you do all that and beat the FNAF 2 level, the things that you've knocked over by shooting the rockets light everything on fire and it burns to the ground, which unlocks the FNAF 3 Phaser Blast minigame. The FNAF 3 Phaser Blast minigame basically has you do a 1v1 with Springtrap, or a cardboard cutout of him. And if you defeat him, he does a weird jump scare for you, and then you unlock the Freddy plushie. The next graffiti is a hint for food prep, where in the 3rd level, you have to throw out every Chica-based food product. That's the Chica Lemon Bar, the Chica Pink Lemonade, the Chica smoothie, and something I forgot about, Chica Chowder, over on the menu. If you throw out all 4 of those, you get Chica's plushie. This hint of Helpy being hit several times, at first I thought was, okay, we'll go into this was before like I knew that it linked up to the last minigame you played, so I was trying to figure out like where we interact with Helpy. I went to the med bay, and there's a big star right on his chest that looks like an impact frame. So I tried to solve it myself.
Torture Helpy. I don't know if this is doing it, guys.
Turns out this is just a hint for the Foxy Log Flume to shoot all 3 Helpies. But specifically, in each of those sequences, there is a very hard to see star that you also need to shoot. Here, here, and here. And then at the end, one last one on the cake. If you shoot all 4 of those, the ride continues to this strange greenish lake with a box. And in that box is the Foxy plushie. No, not this box, don't worry. And finally, in what I think is the most cryptic hint, this graffiti, which I had no idea what it meant. Someone just had to straight up tell me in chat. But this means go to Fizzy Faz Night 3 where there is a can of Soda-Roni and make the tombstone, or is it the graveyard? I forget exactly. It's a drink where you add every flavor except for salt because it's not available yet, and then pour the Soda-Roni in to top it off. Then put it in the chute, turn off power, and trash it. I never would have figured that out. And like, it makes sense in retrospect, but it didn't make sense at the time. If you do all of that, you get the Golden Freddy plushie, which is interesting that the tombstone hint gives you the Golden Freddy plushie. Once you collect all of these plushies, Mystic Hippo gives you this glitched coin, which then allows you to play Princess Quest. Now, this is Princess Quest 4. It's different from the others, but it's still the same idea. We're the princess, we get a sword from the old guy, and now we actually are able to teleport as well. We go through a couple levels inside the castle, and then we find ourselves playing the game. Once we hit ourselves as the princess, we're transported into Princess Quest. And this is, I think, the coolest moment in all of modern FNAF. Maybe all of FNAF. It felt honestly cooler than Henry's speech to me. I don't know if that's the hype talking, but it was so cool to be in Princess Quest. This minigame we've played for like 5 years now. We're in Princess Quest and we're the princess. You go through, you go deeper, and then you go outside to a tombstone puzzle, the same that you see previously in Princess Quest. But this time, the tombstones are not only numbered, but labeled. Those plushies we've collected throughout the game are sitting at each of the tombstones, the same tombstones every time. If you light all 6 tombstones, the door opens. But if you light them in the correct numbered order of the tombstones, you unlock a secret basement area where you can get a Bonnie mask. On collection, it says, "This feels oddly familiar," or something similar. Again, I played this game like twice and I'm trying to make this video very, the exact wording might be different. Then when you go through the door, you approach that same old man. He gives you the Vanny mask and says, "This feels like a fair trade," and he also gives you the Glitch Trap plushie. And then, on the surface, the most confusing sequence I've ever seen in a FNAF game happens. Within Princess Quest, the sister location elevator appears. We go inside and it's new. There's now a ruin wire puzzle, so either they're trying to establish this has always been a thing, but that would be a retcon, so again, I'm trying to not assume retcons, or this is a new sister location elevator. Regardless, it starts moving and falls apart, and you're actually inside a giant crane machine with Vanny playing. Moon comes up, calls you a naughty boy, takes the Glitch Trap plushie and tosses him aside. Then Vanny shows Glitch Trap to you, seemingly crushes him in her hands, and walks away, leaving us to rot in there. Yeah, it's weird, but it's also really cool. So that's all the lore we directly get, except for the Mystic Hippo minigame. I really don't know what that is yet, and I haven't found good, clean footage of it yet, so I don't know. I don't have a PSVR 2. I'm not made of money. So what can we speculate about this game? I want to start with really concrete theories that will be useful for opening up discussion. For the stuff that's more out there, expect that in the coming weeks. To start off, when does this game take place in the timeline? Well, when it comes to timeline placement, I think it's pretty clear. And the main reason for it is that second Roxy makeover minigame I talked about. In it, we the player are giving a makeover for Shattered Roxy. This is the design at the end of Security Breach. However, after she gets frustrated of nothing working, she just demands that we give her the mask. Said mask being that strange redesign from Ruin. This minigame, I think, makes such a solid case that Help Wanted 2 takes place during and after Security Breach, but before Ruin. In case you aren't convinced from that, consider what else we see in the game. We see several instances of the Security Breach animatronics. I'm talking Glamrock Chica, Glamrock Freddy, Roxanne Wolf. Strangely, no Montgomery Gator at all ever, which is really strange to me. And we get to see shattered forms of Chica, Roxy. We even see a shattered Music Man, which has never been seen before. But as far as I can find, the only things from Ruin we see are the Vanny mask, the Faz wrench, the thing that we give Roxy, and the scene at the end of the game. The Vanny Mask and the Faz wrench existed before Ruin. The thing we give Roxy allows Ruin to make sense, and the scene at the end of the game happens at the end of the game. I think this game realistically has to take place during and after Security Breach and right up until the beginning of Ruin, except for one issue: sister location. I still don't have a good explanation for why these animatronics are moving around. Now, I could explain the location. That kind of makes sense to me. After all, you have reason to argue that the FNAF 6 location and the sister location bunker are pretty close, like proximity-wise. And I'll go way deeper into that later on in coming weeks as I'm doing theories for it. But as far as why the animatronics are moving around post-Ennard, I really don't have a good explanation for it. Besides, I don't know, they got new endoskeletons. But realistically, any deeper into that discussion is going to be way too speculative to be useful for today. So next, who are we playing as? And that's up for a much bigger debate, but I know where I currently stand on it. I think our best bet for who the player is actually Cassie's dad. For those who don't know, in Ruin, Cassie, our player character, constantly refers to her dad, who used to be a Faz technician. It's ambiguous where he's ended up now, but we do know that his favorite animatronic was Bonnie. He knew about what happened to Glamrock Bonnie, and presumably he was looking into it. So if we can assume those things about them, which granted is speculation, then we have someone who we don't know much about, but whose identity was recently teased at, and now we have someone who fits that bill. A player essentially going through the Pizzaplex trying to find what's going on. We know he definitely had a Faz wrench, and the Vanny Mask is said to be used by Faz technicians, something we know that he was. For some supporting evidence that doesn't prove it but helps build the case, look into how we're referred to throughout the game. Carney, this strange new animatronic that I mentioned earlier, constantly in most of the Fazer Blast minigames says, "You look like you have kids, try to win a prize for one of them." Which, I mean, we only know like 3 parents in this series, and it's definitely not William or Henry. Glamrock Freddy assumes that we're a Faz technician, but granted he can't see us, and Mystic Hippo, Moon, and Circus Baby all ask us, what makes you so special? Why do we, some random technician, think that we can fix what's going on here? What makes us so special? But I'm going to take it one step further, and this is really dipping into speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. But bake with me for a second. I think the theories were right. I think Cassie's dad is the Bonnie masked bully in the FNAF 4 minigame cutscenes. The one back from the Bite of 83. That's what makes him so special. He also mourns his actions just like Michael, and he might have been keeping up with Fazbear this whole time to see what was going on. That's why this mask in the Princess Quest ending feels so familiar. One thing I forgot to mention in the other half of this recording, this could also explain why we don't see Montgomery Gator. After all, if we are playing as Cassie's dad, who loves Bonnie and knows that probably Monty was the one to do him in, he might just not like Montgomery Gator, and that's why none of the minigames have us interacting with Montgomery Gator. Why would he want to? He killed Bonnie. I do, however, think that the neutral ending where we see Glitchtrap return is the intended fully canon ending, because honestly, what a good narrative tragic tale. A father just trying to do what's best and maybe even trying to make up for some sins he did in the past, gets caught up in something way bigger than him. Overwhelmed by odds he couldn't predict, he's forced to watch his own daughter fall down the same rabbit hole that he did. Maybe Cassie's dad being in the system is what will eventually allow Cassie to break free, but until then he's just a helpless spectator. And I do think that this revelation, if true, recontextualizes what Cassie says in Ruin. Whenever Cassie is talking about her items, specifically character merchandise, she always uses like the third person or refers to them as it or he or she. They're always objects. With Monty, it's hard to look at. Nightmares, it's from that old headset game. Even Bonnie, Dad wouldn't tell me why they replaced Bonnie. But the only time she addresses something directly is the Bonnie mask. When she collects this mask, the mask that her dad probably still had, after all, it feels familiar, even when he's so deep in Princess Quest. And a mask that he probably has a lot of tragedy for. When she collects it, she looks at it and says, "What happened to you?" She's not asking about the Bonnie event. After all, there's a possibility during Ruin she learned what happened to Bonnie. She's asking why her father went to work one day and never returned. Not even during her birthday. What happened to Cassie's dad? Finally, what the hell is with these plushies and this weird ass ending? Well, it's not rocket science to state that these plushies are most likely a representation of the victims of William Afton, at least the first ones. It makes a lot of sense. It tracks for all of the missing child incident kids and Charlotte. What I think is relevant though is the achievement you get for when collecting the Bonnie plush. Remember Jeremy. With the tag retrieve a memory. Not sure what that's about, but maybe it's relating the fact that the bullies from this scene knew the kids that were killed. Maybe that's why they were bullying the crying child in the first place. I don't know. Like I said, speculation. Another thing worth noting is this final puzzle. We are literally handed numbered tombstones that are labeled with plushies, and it's always this order, and in the correct order is the only time you unlock the Bonnie mask. I think this game is telling us the correct order of these deaths were the missing child incident kids, starting with Chica and ending with Golden Freddy, Susie to Cassidy, and then Charlie, which I grant you doesn't make a lot of sense. Henry says, a wound first inflicted on me. This game links 1983 with Charlie, but this tombstone puzzle to me feels so concrete. And then the ending itself, I think is a bit more self-explanatory than people are giving it credit for. A lot of people have been confused because it seems like Vanny is killing Glitchtrap, and that's a valid interpretation, but I don't see it as Vanny killing Glitchtrap. After all, if she's killing Glitchtrap, why would she still be Vanny? Wouldn't Vanessa want to kill Glitchtrap? To me, this is how I see this ending. We, as probably Cassie's dad, have been hunting down what's really going on at the Pizzaplex, and we're in deep. We're so deep into the Vanny AR mask that we're having trouble differentiating what's real. And then we get to the Princess Quest machine where we get so involved, we go inside of the Princess Quest machine, probably just mentally, and when we are as deep in the rabbit hole as it possibly can get, we're also the most exposed. And it's then that Vanny finds us. The achievement for this ending is, quote, consequences, with the subtitles, system threats found, repair complete. Vanny found us in the system, the threat, the thing trying to route out Glitchtrap from the Pizzaplex. She makes us give the plushie of Glitchtrap back, and she shows Glitchtrap what a good job she's done routing out the threat. Then she takes Glitchtrap with her and leaves, leaving us to rot in this prison she's created. And if this is true, I'm starting to think the Princess Quest ending from Security Breach isn't canon. In Ruin, we see the Princess Quest 3 machine toppled over with a sword through it. And for a while, I was like, okay, Princess Quest definitely happened because Princess Quest 3 has been beaten and Vanny's nowhere to be found. But there's a Princess Quest 4 and Vanny is still around. And Cassie's dad was the only one we've known to be in the AR world and hold Princess Quest's sword. So it's possible that after Security Breach, Princess Quest 3 does get beaten, but not by Gregory, by Cassie's dad. And then he goes further in. Finally, I think this game is really nailing home that Glitchtrap is the Mimic 1 program within the AR or VR or virtual world. Essentially the Mimic 1 program that has been trained using Help Wanted, learning all of the misdeeds of Fazbear. And that Vanny's ultimate goal is to bring Glitchtrap into the real world into a suitable body. Although, I do want to still use the term Glitchtrap, only because we have a physical endo in the real world called the Mimic. And calling this the Mimic and calling this the Mimic, I think will just get kind of confusing. So for now, until they are confirmed to be merged in the real world, I'll be referring to this is the Mimic and this is Glitchtrap, even though they're two halves of the same coin, essentially. Hopefully by the next game, Glitchtrap is finally in this endoskeleton, so I can just call it the Mimic. Like any other game in this franchise, we did get some answers of the lore, but mostly we just got a lot more questions. The majority of the plot of this game is unclear. Is it another in-universe VR game, or is it actually happening? Is our player actually doing these events, or are they going through old logs and memories? Actually, pause, back up, who is our player? That's the question I want to focus on for today, because I think I've got a pretty solid answer, and it even explains a lot of the timeline of FNAF in general. So, Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. And obviously, spoilers ahead. Let's start by prepping our ingredients. What does the game actually tell us about the player? Well, a lot actually, at least a lot for FNAF standards. Some of you folks might be new to this franchise, and if Security Breach is your first and or only FNAF game, it might seem like we know almost nothing about our character in comparison to Gregory or Cassie. But keep in mind, besides Security Breach, 99% of FNAF protagonists go unnamed and undescribed. At least in this game, there are characters that actively describe us to our face. In fact, a lot of the animatronics we encounter talk to us and about us. But keep in mind, they do seem to sometimes give differing descriptions. For example, if you abuse Sun enough during arts and crafts, you get this voice line.
Bad kid, I'm putting you in timeout!
But then in Fazerblast, Carney says,
Now, you look like you got kids. Win a prize for the little one.
So which is it? Are we a kid or are we old enough to look like we have kids? Regardless, however conflicting these voice lines may be, I think it's worthwhile to go over every single one that talks about the player. And super quick aside, I just want to say a huge thank you. We actually just hit 200,000 subscribers, which is an insane and unfathomable number, and I couldn't have done it without you guys. I'd been posting content online for like 8 years, but I hadn't started posting edited content until about 2 years ago today. So just thank you all so much for the amazing support. And here's to 200 more, maybe, we'll see. Roxy talks to us a lot, but she never really describes us besides calling us a loser, which tracks. Although her walkie does have my favorite line in the game in it.
You are right. Everyone else is wrong.
Carney actually describes us a lot throughout the Phaser Blast minigames.
The rules should be simple enough for you to understand. Now, you look like you got kids. Win a prize for the little one. Had a feeling I'd be seeing your ugly mug again. You're here by yourself. How sad.
So it seems like in this minigame, Carney is heckling us as an actual Carney would, but consistently talks to us as if we're an adult, assuming we know how things work, assuming we have kids, mentioning how it's sad that we're here alone, things like that. Head Chef actually gives us a big tip in food prep.
Welcome to your new career in food service. It is a task so simple a human can do it. This is going in your personal file. This is coming out of your paycheck.
Which would imply that we're human. It's worth mentioning because if we do have a personal file, then we're an employee at the Pizzaplex. Circus Baby is a bit tricky, specifically because occasionally when you start her minigame, she'll say this.
When the lights go out, we pass the time by playing make-believe. Let's play office. I will be the boss, and you will be the worker.
So all the lines about you being a good employee and that you're working and clocking in and clocking out, they're kind of meaningless because they could just be Circus Baby playing pretend. However, as we're playing, she does say these lines.
I feel bad for you. What makes you so special? I recognize you.
Which is huge. After all, what makes you so special is a line that you're going to see a lot in this game, so it means something. It's very important. But specifically, I feel bad for you and I recognize you can only mean one of two things. Either our character has been to the sister location bunkers before, or we knew Elizabeth Afton when she was still alive. And if we knew Elizabeth Afton, we would have known the Aftons back in like the 80s. That might be what makes us so special, but hold off on that for now. In Fizzy Faz, we don't get many meaningful lines, but we get one very important one.
On file signature accepted.
Which means that whoever we're playing as, at least in Fizzy Faz, has an internal signature that's on file, meaning they work at the Pizzaplex or at least have official signature documents within it. In the carousel, Moon doesn't give us much, but he does reiterate the line,
What makes you so special?
Which is strange that it keeps coming up. And now, onto the big one. Our Queen Mystic Hippo gives us a lot of information. Roll the tape.
You must help. Why are you here? When are you? It needs you. She needs you. Do you remember? What makes you so special? The key is familiar to you. Do you ever look at your hands? I mean, really look at your hands.
Mark got bored, I guess. And yeah, for anyone who didn't know, my cat's name is Mark. So we know what a Faz Wrench is. I think a lot of people are selling short how important Mystic Hippo's dialogue is. I mentioned in the last video that I can't play the Mystic Hippo minigame, and people were like, oh, you're not missing much, there's no lore there. But there is, you probably just have to keep playing it. Again, I can't play the game, and there's not a lot of good footage of someone just hitting it multiple times, but these voice lines prove that something eventually happens. This is some big lore here. I mean, what makes you so special comes up again, but this one feels more meaningful. To me, it feels like she's actively trying to remind us. She's saying like, come on, remember what makes you so special. I mean, she even asks, do you remember? When are you? Why are you here? But honestly, I think the most important lines are, it needs you and she needs you. Because like, oh my God, that begs the question, who are it and she? When I hear she, a few people do come to mind. Pretty much any relevant female in the franchise, so Cassie, Vanny, maybe even Charlotte, maybe Elizabeth, possibly Cassidy, but that's debatable. I mean, hell, Princess Quest is involved in this game pretty heavily. Mystic Hippo could even be talking about the princess in Princess Quest. I don't know. If it's any of those people, that's huge. But when we settle on who we're playing as, we should circle back to this and decide. So that's pretty much everything every other character says about our player. But does our player character say anything about themselves or anything at all? From what I can tell, nothing concretely is ever said by the player, but there's one line that I think is said by our player character. In the secret Princess Quest ending, when you light the graves to open the final door, if you light them in the specific order they're labeled as, you get a bonus trapdoor area with a chest in it. That chest has a body mask, and when received, it reads, "This looks familiar." No one else is in the room. I kind of assume that this is our character seeing the mask and saying that it looks familiar, which could imply that this text is our character saying it is a fair trade, but that's more debatable because there's another possible speaker here. I'm not going to waste any time here. I think we're playing as Cassie's dad, but that's not really a huge claim. A lot of people have been saying this on Twitter and Reddit, but why have they been saying it? Well, it just makes a lot of logical sense. The most recent FNAF release before Help Wanted 2 was the free DLC to Security Breach, Ruin. It's a really good little horror experience that gave a lot of people some more good faith in Steel Wool after the admitted blunder of Security Breach. In that DLC, we play as Cassie, a young girl who ventures into the Pizzaplex to rescue her friend Gregory, the player from Security Breach. Throughout the game, she makes a lot of references to her dad. When she picks up a Faz wrench, she notes that it looks just like his. Half the time when she gets Bonnie merchandise, she mentions that Bonnie was her dad's favorite and that he collected that stuff. We never get any concrete information about him, but the game practically begs us to wonder who this guy is. However, one of the major assumptions we can make about him is that he was a Faz technician. After all, if he had a Faz wrench, that would only make logical sense. And since Cassie was at the daycare a lot and had access to the Foxy log flume before it ever opened to the public, it could be explained by the fact that her father worked at the Pizzaplex. And if he was a Faz technician, then at some point he would have had this VANNI mask. At least the posters seem to imply that they are real technician masks, not just something that Vanny uses. All this in mind, the idea that somebody who really likes this franchise and worked at the Pizzaplex would be our protagonist for Help Wanted 2 makes a lot of sense. Even from a game planning standpoint, you have one game that sets up a mystery of some person we haven't met yet, and then the next game you don't say it directly, but you imply that that's who we're playing as. It helps to lead the player on to make the proper assumptions. And then we get this story about somebody who's looking into something and gets too deep before he realizes how much danger he's really in. And Help Wanted 2 also backs this up. Carney's line about us having kids makes sense. I mean, Cassie. But keep in mind the rest of Carney's dialogue is as if he's speaking to an adult. I understand that Carney's jobs are to heckle the audience to try to make them, feel frustrated or anything like that. It's part of the Carney gig. But the heckles he uses really feel like he's talking to an adult man. Stuff like, "Oh, your ugly mug is back. You look like you can handle this. Let's get something better for your talents." To me, Carney is giving divorced dad energy to a divorced dad. That's just the vibe I get. But it's not just in Fazerblast. In Fizzy Faz, our signature is an internal signature that is accepted, which would imply we already work at the Pizzaplex. Even the lines in Food Prep, which are probably just throwaway jokes, back this up. If it's so simple a human can do it, that's why a human is. If complaints get filed in our personal file, that means we have a personal file at the Pizzaplex. Even Freddy's guess would have been right.
After all, you are a Fazbear technician, are you not?
I'm not saying it's confirmed that we're playing as Cassie's dad, but I am saying it's very likely. So if we are to assume we're playing as Cassie's dad, what else can we speculate about him? Let's start with Mystic Hippo. I think "She Needs You" is pretty self-explanatory here. After all, if we're digging into the Pizzaplex to try to figure out why kids are going missing and why animatronics are acting in strange ways, we'd have a vested interest in doing so. Cassie mentions that she spends all her time at the daycare. She was a frequent visitor, probably spending her time there while her dad was working. If Cassie's dad can fix this place, not only would he be helping Fazbear, he would be helping his daughter and keeping her safe. "It Needs You" is more ambiguous. On one hand, it could be the Pizzaplex or Fazbear in general, or it could be something more nefarious like Glitch Trap beckoning Cassie's dad through Mystic Hippo. Although I'm more inclined to believe the Pizzaplex theory. After all, Mystic Hippo hasn't lied to us yet. I trust our queen Mystic Hippo implicit me. Me and my Mystic Hippo don't argue. She says shut up and I do. But the rest of it is what I think is really illuminating here. Why are you here? When are you? what makes you so special? Do you remember? Let's take this as a checklist. We've already figured out probably why we're here. Something is wrong with the Pizzaplex and Cassie's dad is trying to figure it out. But then again, there's still that why. Like Mystic Hippo, Moon, and Circus Baby ask, what makes you so special? Why would Cassie's dad go through all this work just for a business he doesn't even own? After all, it's just a job. If he's worried about Cassie, they could just leave and he could work somewhere else. But he can't, can he? What makes him so special? Well, I think he's the one to answer that question with the Bonnie mask. The Bonnie mask that seems familiar. His Bonnie mask. Yeah, I'm officially on the Cassie's dad is the Bonnie bully from FNAF 4 camp. Everything clicks into place if that's true. That's why the mask is so familiar. In fact, if Cassie's dad was a friend of Michael Afton, Elizabeth Afton would recognize him. He would have been around. She would have seen him. But I'll even go one step further. I think I know our character's name. In fact, I think this character is going to make one of the earliest mysteries that's completely relevant in modern FNAF lore suddenly very relevant again. But instead of continuing to just add evidence and list things out, let's set a narrative. Let's actually talk about the story of Cassie's dad. And I'll bring up evidence as it comes up. Now, I'm gonna be super real. Bake with me for a second. A lot of the details of this are, you can take them with a grain of salt, right? What I'm trying to argue here is the events and the evidence that tells us about these events. So things that happen. That is the argument, that is the theory. I'm going to be spinning a narrative though. So there's going to be a lot of like motivation and personal details that make logical sense, but are essentially flavorful fan fiction. So if you're just here for the theory, just pay attention to the major events. Take the details and motivations with a grain of salt. But these games give us like little to no motivation for these characters, so we have to embellish to make a good story. So let's pop our theory into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. After the disappearances of the missing child incident victims and the death of Charlotte Emily, things at the Afton household were tense to say the least. The kids didn't know what had truly happened or transpired. But when your father is rarely home and your name is associated with a restaurant with so much death in the press, things can be rough. It can be hard to cope. Michael, always one to pick on his younger brother, had been upping the ante. His younger brother even believed some of the stories the kids were saying about their father's restaurant. The nerve of him. After all, their family was already struggling with all these tragedies. How dare his own brother believe the lies the people were saying about them? It pissed Michael off, and it nudged him just enough to up the bullying one fatal time. On his brother's birthday, he was once again crying at the restaurant, and enough had been enough. Michael and his friends were gonna bully him a little bit, but really just try to shock him out of whatever funk he's in. Prove to him that these things are harmless. Michael and his friends decide to pick his brother up and make him plant a big old kiss on Fredbear. That'll shake him out a bit. Nothing will happen and he'll know that these things are harmless, but they aren't. And that act ended up causing the coma that took his youngest brother's life. First the kids, then Charlotte, and now him. So many tolls taken by this family. Michael apologized to his brother and swore to make it right. And one of Michael's friends, sharing in that guilt, took responsibility as well and consoled him. When the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened up with the brand new toy animatronics, Michael thought it was his responsibility to make sure this restaurant took off well. It would be his responsibility to be a good son and try to make up for the sins of his past to his father. But William didn't want Michael anywhere near the place. Michael's friend, though, he could probably get away with it. Getting a job as an overnight security guard to fill a spot, Jeremy Fitzgerald started his job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Jeremy worked there for only a week, until tragedy struck again. He'd been telling Michael how the animatronics had been acting strange at night, but Michael honestly got enraged at that mention. These stories are what caused his brother to be so afraid. In part, they're the reason his brother died. And how Jeremy believes them too? Jeremy insisted he wasn't kidding, but it was too late. After another tragedy occurred at Freddy's, Jeremy was switched to the day shift for one party. And in that party with the animatronics roaming around, one of them took a decisive bite in 1987, straight to the frontal lobe of Jeremy Fitzgerald, severely injuring him and taking away much of his memory, but not killing him. He survived, but couldn't remember much at all. He remembered how much he loved Freddy's, but his relationships, the people he knew, all gone and lost. Michael was dumbstruck. Were these stories actually real? Did he lose another friend to something he thought was a myth? He needed to find out, so he got a shift at Freddy's against his father's wishes under a fake name, Fritz Smith. And there he learned the truth. The bodies, the rumors, all of it. true. And in not believing Jeremy, again, the blood was partially on his hands. Having caused enough damage to Jeremy's life, Michael thought it would be best to leave him out of what happened next and hope that Jeremy can figure out on his own what is best to do. And Michael would go on to right those wrongs. Cut forward 30 years or so, Jeremy Fitzgerald has a good life. An eclectic man who loved all things Fazbear, and he collected a lot of Bonnie merchandise. He was his favorite. He'd watch their old cartoons, and he even got his daughter Cassie in on the obsession. Imagine the joy he must have felt when him and his daughter realized that a brand new mega pizzaplex was opening nearby. He'd have to work there, and soon after it opened, he got a job as a fast technician, and it was perfect. Cassie could stay at the daycare while he worked, and after work they could go play the arcades together. It was a good life, but as a fast technician, he would have been one of the first to notice the strange goings-on about the pizzaplex. Jeremy noticed the inconsistencies, the errors in the codes, the strange behaviors that animatronics started to inhibit. This all came to a head when Montgomery Gator attacked and destroyed Glamrock Bonnie. He knew Monty was just a robot and that this was an error in his programming. Montgomery Gator, like the rest of the Glamrocks, could have been based off of those mimic endoskeletons and just learned the wrong behavior, but there are stopgaps in their programming for violence. There should be stopgaps in their programming for violence. He knows that Monty is just as much a victim of this event as Bonnie was, but still, Monty was hard to look at after that event, and he generally avoided him. To prevent any more destruction, he would have to dig into the pizzaplex to see what was the matter. Surely just a corrupt file or two was starting to spread and maybe he could stop it early. He'd start with the animatronics, but not only were they modified with a calling card of G's and Y's left all throughout the code. G and Y, just like GGY, the arcade high scores all throughout the arcade machines. Maybe the arcade machines had something to do with it. Looking into the arcade machines, he started to notice that some of them were moving or being relocated without proper notification. Eventually, he stumbled upon Princess Quest. He'd follow these games, beating them, trying to prove himself worthy of whatever mystery they're hiding. And once he beat Princess Quest 3, he thought it was over, but using his Vanny mask, he could track that electrical signal. It was still leading somewhere a lot of electricity had been being drained under the Roxy Raceway. And when he went there, he found the FNAF 6 pizzeria. At this point, he should have notified someone, but he knew that he had to fix this. He didn't want to give up his job. This is the best job he's ever had in a franchise he loves, and he had to protect his own daughter too. The pizzaplex needed him, and so did she. But it was in that pizzeria that he began to learn what was really going on at the mega pizzaplex. In one timeline of events though, that's where Jeremy Fitzgerald's story ends. As his digging is continued, he's caught by Glitchtrap. Staff bots kill him, and whatever was left of his consciousness remains in the AR world he was adventuring in, eventually winding up in a mask bot styled after Bonnie, witnessing his own daughter begin down the rabbit hole that ended his life. But that's not the only possible way that his story ends. Not if Glitchtrap recognizes the empty space in Jeremy's head, the missing memories left from the bite of 87. As Jeremy digs through the logs and files of that monitor, not only does he see records and his own memories of working at the pizzaplex, but he even sees what Michael Afton had gone through. He remembered Michael, he thinks, and in that vulnerable moment, Glitchtrap begins to seed his way into the space in Jeremy's mind, giving him memories of what happened so long ago, asking, "Do you remember, Jeremy?" The children killed by this franchise, the children that he knew, but there was still one major memory that eluded him. Mystic Hippo tried to remind him of what he did, but only when he was as deep as possible in this rabbit hole in the bottom of Princess Quest 4 did he truly remember. Upon looking at the Bonnie mask, it all added up. It seemed familiar. What he did, what he caused, came to the surface. That's why he is so special. He was there. The line "remember Jeremy" is invoked in this game, but whereas previously it means, "Hey, do you remember someone named Jeremy?" In this game, I think it means, "Hey, someone named Jeremy, do you remember?" And it's just then that Glitchtrap knew he had another servant. First Vanny, then Gregory, and now Jeremy. But not all servants are made equal. Just as Glitchtrap took hold in Jeremy's mind and he received his own Glitchtrap plush, someone else noticed. Vanny found out. While still in that vulnerable state, Vanny caught Jeremy, took Glitchtrap out of him, and destroyed the piece of code that tried to turn Jeremy into another subject. She was his apprentice. No one else could take her place. Gregory may have gotten away when she did it to him, but Jeremy would stay right here. And lost in the digital realm is where Vanny left his mind. And that is what I think Help Wanted 2 is telling us. Someone from Michael's past was trying to continue his legacy, but got in way too deep, way too quick. Also, if this is true, that would mean so far we've uncovered that Cassie's real name is Cassie Fitzgerald. Maybe Cassandra, maybe Cassidy, we're not sure, but at least Cassie Fitzgerald. 2 full videos, 3 full streams, and an entire podcast episode. Rye, are you done milking the new FNAF game yet? Are you kidding me? No. Did you see what I did with Ruin? That was just DLC. We have a whole new game. Genuinely though, Help Wanted 2 just brought us so much to the table. Information about new characters, hints about old characters, and possibly, I think, information about the very beginning of the FNAF timeline, specifically the early events they're in. So slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. So when I say the earliest moments of the timeline, what exactly am I talking about? Technically, the very beginning of the timeline would be William and Henry forming Fazbear Entertainment, but I want to focus on the notable moments that are likely after that, the earliest deaths in the franchise that gets the whole possession and horror stuff rolling. That being the deaths of the crying child, Elizabeth Afton, Charlotte Emily, and the missing child incident. All that in mind, I think a brief overview of those events is in order. The crying child is the nickname for the boy we play in the FNAF 4 minigames. It's often speculated that he's the youngest son of William Afton. He's relentlessly bullied by his older brother, who is also often speculated to be Michael Afton. We know he loves the Fazbear characters, but he is seemingly terrified of the animatronics, partly due to something he saw. We don't actually see the crying child die on screen, but we do see the accident that causes his death. On his birthday, his older brother and his friends are bullying him and decide to pull a prank on him. They hoist him up and put his head in the mouth of the Fredbear animatronic. Unfortunately, the animatronic then bites down, sending the crying child into what is probably a coma, judging by the rare screens you can get in FNAF 4 that show hospital equipment. That and the dialogue that we get right after that bite, where we see the older brother wonder if he can hear him and apologize. It's presumed he later dies. Other things to note is that 1, a child claims that the animatronics come alive at night and kill children and hide their bodies. 2, rarely the TV in the crying child's house can show the Freddy and Friends TV show, showing the Freddy Fazbear cast of characters as well as the date 1983. This could be when the minigames take place, but take it with a grain of salt, because after all, Freddy's was founded in 1983, so this could just be the date of the cartoon. But it is still worth mentioning, especially because 1983 is brought up a lot in this franchise, including in Sister Location, where when punching 1983 into a keypad, you can see shots from the FNAF 4 household on the monitors. It's also the code in Help Wanted 2 to get this puppet plushie, and the Fall Fest in Curse of Dreadbear is Fall Fest 83. Elizabeth Afton is an interesting date to talk about, because we have a lot of context about her death, its ripple effects, and its causes, but not many of those details are meaningful when trying to suss out a date. The Funtime animatronics are Williams' creations. They're incredibly advanced robotics capable of various tasks, but they're also equipped to be the Ocean's 11 of kidnapping children. You know, I really wrote that and tried to say it like a normal thing. And this is the second time I'm recording because the first time I forgot to hit start recording. And every time I say it, like, what the fuck? But for real, 2 of them, Funtime Foxy and Ballora, are equipped to distract. Ballora specifically in her blueprints is listed to have, quote, deter and misdirect remote activation. Meanwhile, Circus Baby and Funtime Freddy are built to be able to kidnap a child when alone with one. We can see a fake child in Funtime Freddy's blueprint, but we actually see Circus Baby try to do it with presumably Elizabeth Afton. William, knowing that they're dangerous, did not want his children playing with them, and he kept telling Elizabeth Afton several times to not play with Circus Baby specifically, even though she was made for her. Alright dude, you are shedding way too much. I can't breathe. There's so much fur in my nose. I got cat fur in my mouth. For anyone who didn't know, I am allergic to pet dander. But Circus Baby describes the event that happens when Elizabeth Afton eventually snuck off to see her, and like we hear Elizabeth Afton describe in the midnight dialogues. But once Elizabeth gets alone with Circus Baby's programming takes over. She offers her an ice cream cone, and once she gets close, she scoops her inside. And then, either due to programming that we're not privy to or an accident, Elizabeth Afton instead dies. And going off the eye color change in Circus Baby, Elizabeth Afton then goes on to possess Circus Baby. Like, this is a lot of information that we don't have about like most of this franchise, but none of that information really tells us a time frame. We do know that it would have had to happen after the Funtimes are built, obviously, but before Sister Location, which isn't a lot to go off off of, but we do know that Circus Baby's Pizza World was built after a Freddy's location shut down. Charlotte Emily's death is a bit more direct, but similarly hard to pin down a date for. We see two different angles of Charlotte's death, one in FNAF 2 and again in FNAF 6. FNAF 2's depiction is Give Cake to the Children, where we play as Freddy giving cake to various kids inside of a restaurant. One kid is locked outside, and eventually a car pulls up, a purple guy gets out, the kid starts crying, the kid dies, and the car drives away, and then you're jump scared by the puppet. We get more context for this death and an explanation for the puppet jump scare in FNAF 6, when in the security puppet minigame we see a puppet trying to track children get blocked by boxes, and Charlotte Emily get locked outside. Eventually Charlotte disappears, but the puppet does get out of the box and go after her. However, once the puppet gets there, it finds that Charlotte is already dead, and due to the rain, it collapses on top of her. It's later confirmed by Henry in the final speech of FNAF 6 that Charlotte Emily, the daughter of the guy talking, goes on to possess the puppet. And I do want to be specific here, the possession is what's confirmed by Henry. The name Charlotte Emily actually doesn't get said at all in the games, but the parallel Henry in the books has a daughter named Charlotte Emily, so it kind of just makes sense to assume that this one's also called Charlie. At least we might as well use it until proven otherwise. And finally, the event that caused the most hauntings per capita, the missing child incident. This is first mentioned all the way back in FNAF 1 with the newspaper clippings that can rarely appear on the walls in Freddy's. What we learn is that a total of 5 children go missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. First 2 and then 3 more. Afterwards, the animatronics started getting kind of sticky and smelling bad. Then, after about a year of looking for a buyer, that Freddy's shuts down. We get a lot of information about the missing child incident over the years. FNAF 6 presumably gives us the names of the victims, many of which parallel the characters in the books. But there is a discrepancy. In the games, the names are Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, Jeremy, and 2 hidden gravestones. Presumably one for Charlotte, who isn't part of the missing child incident but is there, and Cassidy. The Silver Eyes instead, when listing the 5 children of the missing child incident, do list Cassidy, but replace one of the names with Michael. In the Fazbear Fright series, there's also another re-showing of these events, when the notorious time-traveling ball pit occurs. Essentially, a kid goes in a ball pit, and he comes back out in the past, in 1985, in which, while he's there, a man in a yellow rabbit suit shows him 6 corpses wearing birthday hats. He eventually runs away and escapes, but you know, this is seemingly a retelling of the missing child incident. I mean, dead kids and a guy in a rabbit costume, but the number is different and the methodology doesn't line up. After all, these kids are out in the open, they're not hidden. Some other information of note, although the books don't exactly line up one-to-one with each other or the games, is that both versions of the book MCI take place in 1985. However, we never get an actual date in the games. So that's that, a series of events that a lot of FNAF theorists, myself included, have been trying to organize to make a timeline. I've made my fair share of guesses, and for the longest time, I thought the most logical order was the crying child, the missing child incident, Charlotte Emily, and Elizabeth Afton. If not for the simple, straightforward logic that the crying child has the fewest amount of prerequisites necessary to happen. It's an accident. It could happen anywhere for any time with anybody. But the rest of the incidents, in my opinion, would require more context to happen beforehand to be able to happen in the first place. The missing child incident and Charlotte would require William to literally kill somebody. And if William Afton is killing people, I would like to assume there's some kind of, albeit twisted and illogical, reason in his mind for doing so. Of course, that's not necessary. He could just do that. He could just be a villain that kills for no reason. But if we can find a reason in an order of events, then that would make for a better timeline, I think. And for the same reason, Charlotte Emily has an additional necessary thing, the security puppet. It's a seemingly very advanced piece of security that's able to track the location of children. Something like that, I think, would require a tragedy beforehand to warrant being created. But again, you could argue that security for children is always a good thing, even if something bad hasn't happened yet. Finally, the event I think requires the most prerequisites is Elizabeth Afton's death, because she requires the Fun Times to be built, and the Fun Times are stated to be built for a restaurant that opens after Freddy's closes, and they are literally kidnapping machines. So again, William could have just made them because, but if we can find a compelling reason for William to make kidnapping robots, that would make for a more compelling timeline. The order I've been suggesting I thought made the most logical sense. The crying child can just happen because it's an accident, but after the crying child, William goes crazy and does the missing child incident. After children go missing, Henry creates something that keeps track of children. After the security puppet has been made, William kills Charlotte Emily out of retaliation. Then, after all of that, either in that space or after FNAF 2, William then goes and makes the fun times, which then kill Elizabeth Afton. I still think that's a pretty decent order of events, but what does Help Wanted 2 change about that? Maybe nothing, but maybe everything. One of the most interesting moments comes at the end of Help Wanted 2, the second ending to be precise. Throughout the game, something is reaching out to us, the player, who I believe to be Cassie's dad, and that something is giving us hints. If we listen to those instructions, Glitchtrap's hand comes out and gives us a plushie. Specifically, this plushie seems to be a poppet with a paper mask of one of the animatronics. The Freddy's roster anyway. Freddy, Chica, Bonnie, Foxy, Golden Freddy, and the puppet. Quick but important aside, puppets are a long-held tradition of many faiths and cultures, and they're often associated with witchcraft, but like with most things about witchcraft and other various cultures, a lot of the information about them have negative connotations because of bad and wrong retellings in storytelling and media. While it's true that puppets are often meant to represent a person that you would then do a spell or prayer for, they were used in positive rituals. Things like wishing that person could find love or prosperity or even protection. Or often they were symbolic gestures to protect a household or a kitchen. These rituals were often done by inserting things into the puppet, like herbs or crystals or other things. We can even see evidence of this insertion in the in-game models, where there are patches taken off of the puppet and re-sewn in. Likely something was put inside of the puppet. The achievement you get on collecting your first one describes it as a memory, but it's interesting that these historically positive figures were the things chosen to represent memories of our character, and now they're being given back to Cassie's dad by Glitchtrap, a program set on recreating Fazbear's worst moments. Regardless, once you collect all 6, you can access the Princess Quest arcade machine. We play it, go into the game, go deeper in, and eventually find ourselves in this courtyard. And really, we find the reason I'm making this video. 6 tombstones, labeled 0 through 5, that are all labeled with those poppets. Chica on 0, Foxy on 1, Freddy on 2, Bonnie on 3, Golden Freddy on 4, and the puppet on 5. If you light them in that order, you get access to a secret basement with a Bonnie mask that is familiar to Cassie's dad. I believe the mask that links Cassie's dad to being the Bonnie bully in the FNAF 4 flashbacks, proving that this is the correct order of those tombstones. Then we move on, trade our Vanny mask for a Glitchtrap plushie, and enter the sister location elevator that takes us to the ending cutscene. This ending is very important, do not get me wrong, but we're not here today to talk about this moment, we're here to talk about that courtyard and how we get to that moment. To me, this reads as us finally getting a full confirmation on the events of the beginning of the franchise, the missing child incident and the deaths of Charlotte Emily, Elizabeth Afton, and the crying child. But at least right now, it feels so definitive that this is the game telling us not only was it the missing child incident and then Charlotte Emily, but it was Chica, Foxy, Freddy, Bonnie, Golden Freddy as the missing child incident, starting with Susie, ending with Cassidy. Something I didn't mention earlier, but in the missing child incident, it's also confirmed in Ultimate Custom Night that at least within the missing child incident, Chica was the first. One of the death lines is literally, "I was the first, I have seen everything." Some people say that's proof that the missing child incident happens first, but it's at least evidence that Susie was the first victim of the missing child incident. Not to mention, the only other time a group of these characters were referred to with tombstones was FNAF 6, where we got confirmation of their names. So it feels very important. But is this game actually telling us the proper order of these two events? First, the missing child incident, then Charlotte Emily's death. I believe so, but admittedly, it has a lot of problems, as you can tell by the fact that we're probably only halfway through this video. A lot of people like to bring up Give Gifts, Give Life, in which we see the puppet guide the souls of the children to the animatronics. The logic being that the puppet is already there before the spirits possess the animatronics, so Charlotte Emily was already dead. Another piece of evidence is that that was Casey, now we have Mark. Another piece of evidence is that both versions of the missing child incident in the books, both Into the Pit and Silver Eyes, take place in 1985. So logically, the game's version also probably takes place in 1985, which, if the 1983 date is significant with Charlotte Emily, would put it before the MCI. There's one last much stronger piece of evidence against this that I'll get into later. First, let's talk about why I don't find these two reasons entirely compelling. I'm not going to be debunking them, there's really no strong evidence against it. I'm just trying to argue why I don't find it as confirmed as other people do. First off, Give Gives Give Life, in my opinion, doesn't really tell us anything about its timeline placement. Sure, the puppet is already there before the spirits possess the animatronics, but both in Fazbear Frights, Silver Eyes, and Tales from the Pizzaplex, we see several instances of spirits wandering around before they possess anything. In fact, in Alone Together, one of the most recent stories from Tales of the Pizzaplex, we are explicitly told a story about a kid who dies and his body is never found. Because of that, he doesn't even realize he's dead, and he starts wandering around locations he was once alive at, until eventually he finds his body, in which then he gets his memories back and realizes he's dead. I made a full video talking about how that could be a direct parallel with the kids from the missing child incident. They die, they get stuffed, and their bodies are never found. Now those spirits wander around Freddy's, still playing, thinking they're still alive, until eventually Charlotte, a girl whose body was left in an alleyway and likely found immediately, possesses the puppet, the thing left on her body. And then as the puppet, she can find these spirits and help them find their own bodies, giving them their memories back. And once they have their memories back, they probably then go on to possess those animatronics to try to get revenge for being killed. All this to say, Give Gives Give Life doesn't necessarily contradict anything. All it's telling us is that Charlotte Emily is the one who helped them. And then as far as 1985 from the books goes, that's a really solid point. There's really no strong evidence directly against 1985 being the year of the missing child incident. However, I still don't think it's necessarily confirmation of 1985, specifically because of the other discrepancies with the missing child incidents in the books. In the Silver Eyes, the names are different, they don't match up with what we know. And in Into the Pit, it's 6 children, not 5. So if there's already so many differences between these missing child incidents, why should anything be assumed to be the exact same? Again, it doesn't disprove 1985, but I think it's reasoning enough to not assume 1985 is canon. Now then, I teased that there was one specific piece of counter evidence that I have no good arguments against, and that's Henry's own words in FNAF 6.
A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
That's pretty cut and dry. Unless we can find a way to reframe a wound first inflicted on me to include the missing child incident, it's hard to argue that Charlotte Emily doesn't die first. So keep that in the back of your mind while we explore what a timeline would look like if Charlotte Emily isn't the first. If we are to assume, for now, that the missing child incident happens before Charlotte Emily, what time constraints are we working within? Well, we know the MCI happened at a Freddy's location because of the cast of characters that got stuffed. Foxy, Chica, Bonnie, and Freddy were never at Fredbear's Family Diner, they were at Freddy's. Fredbear's Family Diner was just Fredbear and Spring Bonnie as far as we're aware. We also know that it had to have happened before the FNAF 2 location, and that it couldn't have happened at the FNAF 2 location. It couldn't happen at FNAF 2 because FNAF 2 is confirmed to only be open for a few short weeks, and the Freddy's that the MCI occurs in is at least open for a full year. Furthermore, it probably has to take place before FNAF 2 because by the beginning of FNAF 2, the withered animatronics are already moving and acting as though they're possessed. So, by my money, the MCI has to happen sometime between 1983, when Freddy's first opens, and 1987, when FNAF 2 opens. Charlie is a lot more variable, however. All we really know for sure about Charlie's death is that the security puppet was in use, and it happened outside a Fazbear restaurant. Many people argue that she dies outside of a Fredbear's Family Diner restaurant, mainly because of the relatively simple layout we see in Give Cake to the Children that is reminiscent of the FNAF 4 Fredbear's Family Diner that we get to see. But that is still fairly speculative. After all, Give Cake to the Children gives us almost no details about these characters, and this sprite could be Freddy or Fredbear. It's really hard to tell. We do know, however, that in the security puppet minigame, the puppet doesn't have tears, and in FNAF 2, it does, implying that the tears are the sign of possession. So, Charlie must have died before FNAF 2. Also, the security puppet could be used to implicate a reason for being necessary. But again, to be very fair, you don't need a reason for good security. You can just have good security. Finally, Help Wanted 2 added another very valuable possible hint. In Sister Location, like I mentioned earlier, when you're in the private office, there's that keypad where you punch in 1983 and it shows you the FNAF 4 rooms on the monitors. Well, in Help Wanted 2, the hint to get the puppet poppet is an Office Night Puppet Master, where this drawer is unlocked and you can punch in 1983. Doing so gives you the puppet. This is hard to decide either way. On one hand, it could be telling us that Charlie dies in 1983, but on the other hand, that was already the code for the keypad, and it would be strange to change the code if it's in the same location. So it could just be that logically it still has to be 1983, even though it does something different now. For the crying child, we know it has to take place at a Fredbear's Family Diner. After all, the only characters in that restaurant are Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. But the event takes place either right before or after Freddy's opens up. After all, there are Freddy Fazbear characters as plushes, merchandise, and even a cartoon, things that don't appear in Fredbear Family Diner. The TV also displays 1983 on it, which again, Freddy's opens in 1983, so that could just be referring to that. But because of that, we know that at least it takes place after 1983. Again, worth noting for time constraints is that child that talks about missing children in the FNAF 4 cutscenes. If this is a rumor based on some sort of truth, then the missing child incident would have taken place before these events. And finally, Elizabeth. There are really only two major time constraints for her death. For one, we know that Circus Babies opens up after Freddy's closes. And we also know that the Fun Times need to exist in order to exist and kill Elizabeth Afton. Like the missing child incident and Charlotte, we technically don't need a reason for the Fun Times to exist. William could have just made them. But if we can find a reason for the main villain to create literally child kidnapping robots, then it would make for a more cohesive timeline. Not to mention, the Fun Times are much more experimentation focused than anything else so far. They're made to be studied and tested on. So by that point in the timeline, it implies that William knows that some kind of possession is possible and he's trying to study it. There's one more, much subtler hint that Help Wanted 2 I think is giving us about this timeline, and that's linking the missing child incident and Charlotte Emily. Granted, FNAF 6 already placed their graves in the same shot, but twice in this game, we have to collect 6 things: the 5 missing child incident kids and Charlotte. Faz Force is the 5 animatronics and the puppet, and the poppets are the 5 animatronics and the puppet. And the graves in Princess Quest 4 are the 5 animatronics and the puppet. I don't think the game is arguing that Charlotte was a part of the missing child incident. Again, her death is very public, she's not missing. But what I do think it's suggesting is that whatever order they take place in, Charlotte Emily and the missing child incident happen right next to each other, and possibly because of each other. Maybe Charlotte saw something she wasn't supposed to. All this in mind, what about this? In order, the timeline of events could be in 1983, the first year that Freddy's is open, the missing child incident occurs. After that tragedy, Henry builds the security puppet, a device that is seemingly specifically made to track the locations of children, which would make sense to be built after children go missing. But then William takes it a step further and very publicly kills Charlotte Emily outside of a Freddy's. Sometime after that, maybe even in the same year, as Freddy's begins to lose funding and revenue, the rumors of killer animatronics that hide away children start to spread. Those rumors, plus the possibility that the crying child saw either the missing child incident or Charlotte Emily, lead him to be terrified of animatronics. That fear is what causes Michael to ramp up his bullying against his brother. Said bullying eventually leads him to pull a prank that ends up taking the crying child's life because of the Fredbear animatronic. After all this constant failure and tragedy, both Fazbear locations close down, and then it's either in this time frame or after the FNAF 2 location closes that the Fun Times are created by William, those Fun Times who eventually kill Elizabeth Afton. Briefly, this order could be missing child incident, Charlotte Emily, crying child, Elizabeth Afton. And Help Wanted 2 actually supports this. In the area where the graves are found in Princess Quest 4, there's actually something that could be argued represents all 4 of these events. Like I've been saying, there's the graves for missing child incident and Charlotte, but then there's the Bonnie mask, which if it is the Bonnie bully mask for Cassie's dad, that would then refer to the crying child. And then at the very end of this sequence, we get into a sister location elevator, which would be reminiscent of Elizabeth Afton. Now to be fair, the mask is loose evidence. It's not even directly clear that this is the Bonnie mask from FNAF 4. I believe this mask is here to remind our player, Cassie's dad, that he's the Bonnie bully, but that's heavy speculation. I will say, however, why else would this game end with a realistic sister location elevator? We could have gone from the end of Princess Quest 4 to that crane machine in like any way possible. I can't think of any other reason that it's a sister location elevator besides to link to Elizabeth Afton. Now, counter arguments. If the MCI is first, why the hell did William do that? And what about Henry saying a wound first inflicted on him? I think I have an answer for that. Actually, I think I have an answer that answers both of those questions at the same time, but it's technically cheating because the answer is an event that we really have no solid information on. Fall Fest. I was really trying to figure out what the hell Fall Fest is supposed to mean. Help Wanted 1's entire DLC is based around it, and Help Wanted 2 has constant references to it. There's even a Fall Fest of 83 banner, and we know how important 1983 is. And then Help Wanted 2 introduces a brand new animatronic with Carney, which is essentially a Lefty lookalike that yells at you. And that's when it clicked. Carney looks just like Lefty, an animatronic that is confirmed to be built by Henry Emily. What I'm about to say is 100% speculation, but I think it makes a lot of sense, so bake with me for a minute. What if Fredbear's Family Diner was William's creation? The restaurant of his dreams that used his favorite characters he had ever created, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, using his state-of-the-art Springlock suits. What if then that Henry was the brilliant tech guy businessman who approached William with the promise to revolutionize this chain and make them thousands upon thousands of dollars? William agreed, but soon found that Henry's vision didn't quite include William's creation. Henry wanted to take the brand in an entirely new direction. Freddy and Friends? It was bad enough that Henry wanted to redesign the characters to be Freddy Fazbear and Bonnie the Bunny, but now there's Chica and Foxy too. Who the hell are these characters? And then he found out Fazbear, the new brand name, was going to be sponsoring the Fall Fest and giving them animatronics for it. But again, not his characters, not his dream. Who the hell is Carney? Why does Carney represent them? Why not Fredbear? Enough was enough. He had to stop Henry before Fredbear's Family Diner became some ancient relic and Freddy was the new focus. So, during Fall Fest, he started a fire and burned down the entire festival, Carney along with it. It shook the public, but it wasn't enough. Freddy Fazbear Pizza still opened and was a hit. It burned brighter than Fredbear's ever did. William lost it. He thought maybe if he could ruin the reputation of Freddy Fazbear's, then Fredbear's would have to be the only one focused on in order to keep the brand alive. So he did the unthinkable and killed 2 children, stuffing their bodies into those 2 brand new characters Henry was so proud of, Chica and Foxy. After all, those are the first 2 in the grave sequence. And we know from the FNAF 1 articles that first 2 children go missing, and then 3 more. People began to complain that the suit smelled, but no one was the wiser, so William went bigger, killing 2 more kids to stuff into the Freddy and Bonnie animatronics. But that time, for whatever reason, he was sloppy and got caught by some other kid, Cassidy. He had to kill Cassidy to cover his tracks, but he ran out of places to put kids. So regrettably, he had to stuff his spare Fredbear suit at Freddy's. That one stung deeply. But after that, the rest of the timeline we already presume takes place. Henry builds the security puppet to try to keep track of kids and make sure no other ones go missing, and in retaliation, William kills Charlotte. After this, Freddy's does eventually close down, but Fredbear's starts to lose traction too. These rumors are too much. Rumors that cause fear in his youngest son, which leads him to get pranked by Michael, ending up in his death. And then, after all of this, Fredbear's closes too. And then either in this space or the space after FNAF 2, the fun times are created, which then go on to kill Elizabeth Afton. Missing child incident, Charlotte Emily, the crying child, and Elizabeth Afton. Is it crazy? Yes. Does it disprove almost everything I've argued about the beginning of the timeline? Yeah. Does it use something we have almost no information on as a major piece of evidence? Yes. But is it possible, and does it make sense? Also, yes. I don't know if this is true, but I think it might be what Help Wanted 2 is trying to tell us. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a game that takes place in Fall Fest and finally get some information about this mythical event that happened so early in the timeline. Who actually is the antagonist of Help Wanted 2? I mean, we revive Glitchtrap in one ending, and Vanny kills Glitchtrap in another ending. So who's leaving these images? Why is Glitchtrap handing us the things that lead to his demise? Is it all Vanny? All I know is, like the famous Waverly Place wizards once said, everything is not what it seems. So Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. First, let's gather our ingredients. What do we actually know about our major players here? Now, I've covered nothing but this game for more than a month at this point, so I'm sure you're sick of hearing me recap the game. So just let me be very, very brief in what we're about to go over, okay? Let's do this one last time. Real quick explanation. My ADHD pretty much necessitates that I hold something so I can speak fluidly, and right now my cats are being moody and don't want to be held, and the toast plushie was used as a toy today, so that's still upstairs. So I grabbed the nearest thing I could find that I can hold, which, it's a practice sword. I don't know why it's the nearest thing, but it is, and it's not going to distract me and it'll help me talk fluidly, so deal with it. The only other characters we see outside of minigames are Mystic Hippo, Glitchtrap, Vanny, and the player. Mystic Hippo might be in the lobby all times, but she doesn't talk much, unless you interact with her in PSVR or on very specific instances. Those being when a message is left for us, when we get the Princess Quest coin, and when we get the Faz Wrench, which she calls a key that's familiar to us. Glitchtrap, on the other hand, is a bit more ever-present. Throughout the game, if you listen to the secret messages that you receive, you're given these memorial puppets of the 4 main Freddy animatronics, Golden Freddy, and the Puppet, representations of the first 6 murders of William Afton. Those plushies are always given to you by the hand of Glitchtrap. Furthermore, he's in both endings. In the main ending you get for beating every minigame, you collect 6 Faz Force figures. Once you collect all 6, you get the main combined one, and then you get the first ending. That being Glitchtrap leaving a charging pad, the player getting attacked by staff bots, and then we see the point of view of the mask bot giving the Vanny mask to Cassie, thereby setting up the beginning of Ruin. The only other time we see Glitchtrap is at the very end of the second ending. When you collect all 6 memory puppets that Glitchtrap gives you, you get access to this glitchy coin that lets you play Princess Quest. At the very end of that, you get the Glitchtrap plushie, something that in Help Wanted 1 signified being fully taken over by Glitchtrap. However, it's short-lived, as we are immediately then put into a crane machine where Vanny takes the plushie away from us, presents Glitchtrap, and crushes him in front of us. Then she does a creepy wave and walks away. That's also the only time we see Vanny in-game. Finally, I believe the player of Help Wanted 2 is the father of Cassie. He's also an employee of the Pizzaplex, he was the Bonnie bully from FNAF 4, and I believe that he was also Jeremy Fitzgerald from FNAF 2, otherwise known as the victim of the Bite of 87. Full theory on why I think that over there. But watch this first, because if you click off before it's over, it hurts it in the algorithm. I'm watching you. But if you disagree with that interpretation, totally fine. I understand the FNAF 2 connection is kind of out there. But I will say there's very strong evidence that suggests that we're at least playing as Cassie's dad, who happens to be the FNAF 4 Bonnie bully. But I myself am pretty confident in the FNAF 2 inclusion, so going forward, I'll be referring to this character as Cassie's dad or Jeremy Fitzgerald. See? Quick and painless, just in and out, little catch up. Now, when talking about antagonists, my first thought on how to deduce it would be using the endings. After all, both of them end with Jeremy essentially dying. One definitely and one probably. So if Jeremy dies at the end of the game, then the antagonist won, right? The first ending is, in my opinion, way more straightforward than the second ending. However, there is still one very big wrinkle. On the surface, everything makes sense. By playing the game and doing the several tasks that are laid out for us on the monitor, we play right into Glitchtrap's hand, allowing it to manifest itself into the real world. And then it offs us the moment it gets the chance. But the big question on my mind is, why? What is it about doing these tasks or collecting the Faz Force figures that allows Glitchtrap to come to the real world? Well, I think I have a pretty solid idea on that, and it's all because of Helpy. Throughout Help Wanted 2 in the AR world, Helpy is on the projector constantly telling us what we have to do. Either there's new tasks to complete, or there's a present on the stage for you to collect. Several folks on Twitter started to point out that if you don't collect these presents, Helpy starts getting mad at you. If you leave a present on stage for long enough, he'll even say, "Open the present, don't make me ask again." And throughout the game, when he's giving you these instructions, he's in this weird light blue void. He's not in any real location. This, plus the actions of Helpy or Helpy from Ruin, leads myself and many others to speculate that this is the current avatar of the Mimic 1 program. After all, the Mimic 1 program is a learning program. And Help Wanted 1 showed us that multiple people found Glitchtrap creepy and off-putting. I mean, look at him. So even though the Mimic 1 program seems to fully represent itself as Glitchtrap, I think that Help Wanted 2 and Ruin are establishing that it knows that Glitchtrap can seem off-putting. So when it's trying to lure somebody in and seem more innocent, it adopts this Helpy persona. Suddenly, these projectors make a lot more sense. Helpy, or the Mimic 1 program, is luring you in and telling you what you need to do in order to save the Pizzaplex, but in reality, you're just helping Glitchtrap manifest. To back this up, after the first ending, Glitchtrap is in the real world. And what does Helpy look like after this ending when Glitchtrap has entered the real world? For the first time in the game, he's in a background area of a real location, the beach. Helpy made it out, so did Glitchtrap. Okay, that's all well and good, but then what is the point of the Fast Force figures? Are they the secret to reviving Glitchtrap? No, but I do think they serve a similar function as Helpy, bait. If we really are playing as Cassie's dad, then it's established several times in Ruin that he was a major fan of Fazbear and a collector. If Glitchtrap was able to learn this through the employee database about Jeremy, then all it would have to do is create models for these very obscure 80s action figures in the AR world. Then it could use them to motivate Jeremy into completing the tasks necessary to set it free. Or maybe even just to stall Jeremy, because that's actually where I run into a problem with this. The idea that the Fast Force action figures are just bait to lure Jeremy makes a lot of sense and it's evidence-backed, but we still don't have a lot of evidence-backed theory for why we're completing the minigames in the first place. Do you want to get down, buddy? Or do you just want to not be a baby? Is that good? You want this? That's good. We can speculate, like in my mind I can think of two options. Option 1, stalling. Glitchtrap is probably already in the process of setting himself free when Jeremy finds him, so all he has to do is keep him busy to buy himself some time so he can finish the process. Option number 2 is Glitchtrap is using Jeremy to spread itself throughout the Pizzaplex. All these tasks have us go through every single nook and cranny of the Pizzaplex wearing a Vanny AR mask. The very same Vanny AR mask that is infected with Glitchtrap. We could be patient zero for this place, carrying the plague of Glitchtrap through every single aspect of it. And while I believe both of these options are incredibly plausible, there just really isn't evidence for either one because there's, as far as I can tell, no clear evidence on why we're doing these minigames. So take them with a grain. So what about the second ending? That seems to have a lot more debate surrounding it. First of all, it really seems like Vanny is destroying Glitchtrap in this scene. I mean, it's holding its hands to defend itself for Scott's sake. A lot of people assume that this whole ending is Vanny's doing. And to be fair, there's a lot of good evidence supporting it. After all, Vanny destroys Glitchtrap, so it can't be Glitchtrap's doing, and there's really nobody else that could be doing it. Not to mention all the cut dialogue that many people interpret to be from Vanny. In the files, there are several lines of text attributed to voice that lead the player to this ending. The lines are, quote, "Act natural and don't say anything. The staff might get suspicious. Don't worry, they can't hear me. I am on a special signal the staff can't process. I was able to upload some helpful code. It should look like a key. Find a place where we can talk safely. You need to listen to me carefully. Don't help it escape. It's using you to finish where she left off. Only a small piece of its code remains. It is bound to the past. Find its memories and return. Look for my messages. They will guide you. Open the door. Use the key. Why won't you help? Make it stop. Find them. Release them. You have a chance to end it. You are the last. It kept you for a reason. Deactivate the inhibitor. Remove your mask. See the world as it really is. The memories are freed. Use the token. Bring him to me." And like, fair. If someone is leading you to this ending, why wouldn't it be Vanny? It is Vanny's doing at the end of it. Well, I think there's actually a couple reasons why it's not Vanny. First of all, consider that these lines were cut content. They were probably cut for a reason. But even if they weren't, some of them seem suspect to me. For example, it's using you to finish where she left off. Wasn't Vanny the one working with Glitchtrap? So either it's Vanessa saying these lines, which doesn't make sense because we see Vanny at the end, or Vanny is referring to herself as she, which seems strange. And to be clear, these lines are labeled voice, not Vanny, so we can't take it as an assumption that it would have been Vanny. Furthermore, the voice claims to be the one who gives you the key through some helpful code, which does make sense. The Fazwrench is in the AR world, so it would just be code. But you need to use this Fazwrench to get either ending, so presumably Glitchtrap would also want you to have that Fazwrench. Putting the voice aside for a second, if this whole ending is Vanny getting outside help to destroy Glitchtrap and free herself, why would she betray the person she entrusted to help? At the end of the second ending, Jeremy is left in there to rot, presumably. She waves to us creepily and leaves us in the claw machine. If this is Vanny freeing herself, why is she still acting the same as before? Or why does she not then realize she's Vanessa and then go to save us? Something here doesn't add up. Alright, I hear you.
In many ways, the work of a critic is easy.
It's a hell of a lot easier to tear down a theory than it is to raise one up. And to be clear, I don't think I've disproven the idea that this is Vanny's doing. I just personally don't believe that's the case. But if that's not what I believe, what do I believe? Well, for some context, let's take a quick tour back through Help Wanted 1. Throughout the games, you collect these glitchy cassette tapes that lead you into the actual lore of the game. They're of the last beta tester recounting her experience in testing the game and encountering this strange and growing manifestation of a rabbit. She calls it an anomaly or a virus, or she doesn't know, but she tells us that it seems to menace at her and it might be the reason why the tester before her cut off his own face. Throughout the logs, we learn that she knows it began to attach itself to her security logs, so she makes the decision to try to break them up, encrypt them, and scatter them throughout the game so that she can hopefully deter this creature. But then, the 16th log is different. It doesn't say to keep them hidden or keep them scattered. Instead, it tells you to let the virus try to take a hold of you, and then press a specific button combination to combat it. Lo and behold, if you do that, you lose, and you're actually taken over by the Glitchtrap virus. This is how Vanny is made. Notably, Glitchtrap isn't freeing itself in this moment. Seemingly, it's making a copy of the Mimic 1 program and inserting it into Vanessa's mind. And then it begins training that version of the Mimic 1 program into being a perfect slave to Glitchtrap, Vanny. So is that the story for Help Wanted 2? Vanny is trying to get us to destroy Glitchtrap, but then at the very end, Glitchtrap swoops in and changes the script. No, that really can't be the case. Glitchtrap is the character we see throughout the entire game, and then at the end, Vanny shows up. In fact, it feels like an inverse of what happens in Help Wanted 1. In fact, bake with me for a second. We know for almost certain that Glitchtrap is trying to use Jeremy to be free. Everything it does as Helpy leads it to this outcome. However, according to cut lines from the voice, it also knows that Jeremy is important. I think because he's the Bonnie bully who's partly responsible for the death of the FNAF 4 crying child. The lines "it kept you for a reason" and "you are the last" seem to say so. So what about these memory poppets? Well, there are other lines in this game that were cut that don't seem to add up with the logic of the Mimic 1 program. Specifically, it is bound to the past, find its memories, and return. From what we know about how the Mimic operates, this isn't it, Chief. The Mimic is a learning program, but it doesn't necessarily have memories, nor is it bound by them. It has familiar habits, but this doesn't really line up well. In fact, these memories are more so likely to be from Jeremy, someone who was around during that time and would have possibly known these children that went missing. I don't think the Mimic is actually bound by these memories, but I do think it's using these memories to bind Jeremy. While Glitchtrap is toying with Jeremy to free itself, it most likely learns who Jeremy really is, either through the employee logs or from just exposure. And after realizing how special Jeremy is and always being in need of new assets, Glitchtrap might have attempted to turn Jeremy to its side, using the same exact tactic it does in Help Wanted 1, pretend to be someone else and trick someone into helping you. In Help Wanted 1, it was the whole let him try to manifest inside of you and cut it off. Now it's this. This is why Glitchtrap is the one handing us these memories. It's trying to remind us of our own repressed past while simultaneously tricking us to think that we're on the way to destroying Glitchtrap. And after all of this is said and done, all it's done is bring Jeremy as deep into the rabbit hole as it goes and make him vulnerable. That's why to get to this ending, you collect a glitchy coin and then you literally give your life to Glitchtrap. The way you finally enter Princess Quest and fully put your mind in the digital space is attacking yourself. In a way, we're sacrificing ourselves for Glitchtrap to earn his loyalty. And only then does Glitchtrap give you the tools to prove yourself, the princess's sword. That's the moment Glitchtrap wins. Jeremy's mind is it's for the taking. So then what about the ending? What about Vanny? I still think she is the one that interrupts this process, but I don't think it's to fully destroy Glitchtrap. After all, I believe the Mimic 1 program takes over someone's mind by duplicating itself in their mind. And we see Vanny destroy Glitchtrap, not Vanessa. And sure, you could argue she's Vanny until Glitchtrap is destroyed, but why does she still act like it immediately after? Instead, I think Vanny wants to be Glitchtrap's only servant, and she sees Jeremy as a threat. She might be fine with Glitchtrap toying with Jeremy and using him to free itself, but she just can't shake that feeling of jealousy. What makes you so special? Regardless, she can't sit by as Glitchtrap makes Jeremy the new Vanny, replacing her essentially. That's too far. Princess Quest is interrupted by something that is not of Princess Quest. This digital realm that Glitchtrap can pretty much fully control is stopped and interrupted by something a bit more realistic. Vanny. Once Vanny knows that this version of the Mimic 1 program is embedded and isolated within Jeremy, she takes it out and destroys it, leaving Jeremy to rot in whatever digital space he's in. She would be Glitchtrap's only servant, and that was final. I honestly think this is my best interpretation of the endings of Help Wanted 2 and the involvement of Glitchtrap and Vanny, but it is still just my interpretation. One of the best parts about a Five Nights at Freddy's game is honestly what it changes about what we know about other Five Nights at Freddy's games. The whole franchise at this point can feel like a sort of non-Euclidean liquid, morphing and shifting based on the inputs around it. And one example about that, I think, is what Help Wanted 2 informs us about Security Breach and Ruin. And that's what we're here to discuss today. So slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. Before we know about what changed with Help Wanted 2, we need to know about what is changing, specifically about Security Breach and its endings. The game itself presents us with 6 different endings, and the debate for the longest time was which one was canon, especially with 2 of the endings in particular, the Burn Trap ending and the Princess Quest ending. I love the subtle continuity that you guys can tell that I record the green screen segments after I record the non-green screen segments, because there's so much more white fur on my apron after holding Mark for like 20 minutes. I would argue that the most commonly held theory was that the Burn Trap ending was the canon one, where you go back into the Pizzaplex after 6 AM, get the other Freddy upgrade, go under the Roxy Raceway and confront Burn Trap and Tangle in a boss fight, after which the Pizzaplex collapsed, the Tangle scooping up Burn Trap and running, and Gregory and Freddy making it outside. Honestly, it's always been a good candidate for the canon ending. It's the only ending that's fully animated, the others being comic book pages. It's the ending that requires the most outside 6 AM stuff to do, and I'd argue is the hardest to get, especially before they added save stations after 6 AM, because for a while, once you got to 6 AM, you couldn't save anymore. So you had to do pretty much a third of the game without saving, which is brutal. Not to mention that it also feels the most final thematically, fully upgrading Freddy, going to the base of the issue, and having an actual honest-to-God boss fight. Thinking that this is the canon ending is a totally valid interpretation, but I had for a while thought that the Princess Quest ending was actually the canon one. The ending where if you beat Princess Quest 1 and 2 and saw the Vanny hideout during your playthrough, you could then do a chase sequence towards Vanny's hideout and play Princess Quest 3. Upon beating it, Vanessa seems to be freed from Vanny, and her, Gregory, and Freddy's head go off to that same hill and eat some ice cream. And when I say I think it's a better fit for it being the canon ending, it's mainly because of what it sets up for the future of the franchise. It would give us 2 main characters to pick from, both of which have a history with Afton, and it lets us keep the character and knowledge of Glamrock Freddy without having to reuse that same mechanic because now his body is gone. And honestly, this is just like fanfiction territory, but I think one of the coolest ways they can take this franchise moving forward is if the next game does include these 3 characters, but Fazbear as a company is still doing something shady. So now at the new Fazbear restaurant, Vanessa, Gregory, and Freddy's head essentially have to do a heist, where Vanessa tries to get hired, Gregory pretends to be a normal kid, and they're trying to connect Freddy to the mainframe or something. I don't know, I think that would make for a really compelling game. Regardless, to be honest, as far as evidence for this theory goes, that's kind of light. I don't think there's anything that necessarily proves that it's the canon ending. The only evidence I could come up with before Ruin and Help Wanted 2 was that it's the only 3-star ending. And like, that's cool and all, but that isn't really necessarily evidence that it's canon. But then, Ruin came out. Security Breach got a free DLC expansion, Ruin, this past summer, and it added on more obscurity to the whole situation, because once again, it argued for a couple different endings, but this time it actually gave evidence that Princess Quest could be the canon ending for Security Breach. And on the surface, Ruin seemed to be directly telling us that that was the canon ending. After all, you can collect comic pages that are stated to be made by Gregory as a representation of every other ending in the game except for the Princess Quest ending. Not only that, but when we see the Princess Quest 3 arcade machine, it's toppled on its side and an AR sword is stuck through it, implying that it's been vanquished or beaten. And deeper in Phaser Blast, we see a headless Freddy in the same exact position and damage that he would have been in at the end of the Vanny ending. And Vanny, who would have been freed with the Princess Quest ending, is nowhere to be found in Ruin. Like, it seems really cut and dry, but if you look a little bit closer, it's not. It's uncut and moist. After all, Vanny isn't here, but there's Vanny graffiti all throughout the Pizzaplex. Freddy's in the same spot as the Vanny ending, but it's a Freddy with a prototype stamp on his foot, implying it might not even be the same one. Not to mention, the entire Pizzaplex is fallen to ruin pun intended. And the only endings that can pretty much guarantee that happens are the burn trap ending and the fire escape ending. Not to mention, once you get down to the FNAF 6 location, burn trap is nowhere to be found. Now, I hear you, right? There's a comic page of burn trap and the Tangle, so doesn't that imply that burn trap and the Tangle are complete manifestations of Gregory's mind? They're just something he came up with while doing these weird coping comics. And as much as I want to write that off and just say yes, definitely, I can't. Because at the beginning of Ruin, we see the Tangle. It slithers away, it got out, and it looks identical to that page on the comic. So even though at first the comic page seems to imply that Gregory made the whole thing up, the fact that the comic page is accurate implies he actually saw what's on it, aka the burn trap ending. Not only all of this, but Ruin itself has multiple endings, because of course it does, and it doesn't clarify at all which one is probably canon. In one of them, Gregory betrays us and ends up dropping the elevator to keep the mimic locked in, and we even find out that Gregory has a friend who somehow knows the layout of these caves. However, the pronoun of this friend is deliberately hidden. There's static when Gregory goes to say it. So a lot of us assume this to be Vanessa and the pronoun would be she, but theoretically it could be he, they, or anything else. So with all this information, what's the deal? What ending is Ruin saying is canon? It kind of goes either way. I think at the time after Ruin, I was pretty set in stone that Princess Quest happened. Maybe Burn Trap did too, but at least the Princess Quest ending definitely happened. But that was before Help Wanted 2 came out. It seems that most of the fandom can agree that Help Wanted 2 is showing us what Cassie's dad, who I believe is called Jeremy, was doing in the lead up to Ruin. The debate sparks when considering about what exactly he was doing. To me, it seems clear that Cassie's dad was digging into what was actually going on at the Pizzaplex and trying to fix it. After all, we know from the security breach duffel bags that somebody was going through the arcade machines and trying to essentially expose the glitches in them, and that someone was likely an employee at the Pizzaplex. Cassie's dad fits both of those bills. A Fazbear mega fan who works at the Pizzaplex makes so much sense. To add on to this, in Help Wanted 2, we play Princess Quest 4. And if this arcade machine works the same way that Princess Quest 1, Princess Quest 2, and Princess Quest 3 works, then presumably for Princess Quest 4 to be able to be activated, Princess Quest 1 through 3 have to be activated and beaten. And to be fair, we know that by the time of Ruin that at least Princess Quest 3 is beaten, which backs up this fact. The thing is, what's in that third machine? The princess's sword. And the only character who has canonically wielded that sword besides literally the princess in the arcade machine is Jeremy. I'm honestly wondering if Jeremy, our player, Cassie's dad, was the one to beat all of the Princess Quest arcade machines in the canon events of the timeline. But that's not all, because he might be responsible for the redesigns that the animatronics received for Ruin. We know from the Roxy Salon hard mode that Jeremy is the one who puts the weird mask that we see on Roxy before Ruin. But that's not the only hint towards Jeremy doing things to the animatronics that make them look the way they do in Ruin. One detail that always bugged me about the non-AR version of the lobby in Help Wanted 2 is Chica's hand on the main stage. It's practically the center of attention. It's literally on a stage. It has to mean something. But what? Well, what else does Jeremy do to Chica throughout this game? Feed her with food, cheese, trash, and pizza, and all sorts of stuff. And what does Chica look like in Ruin? Filled up with cheese, trash, and missing the shell of that hand. I think implying that whatever Jeremy was doing during Help Wanted 2 is the reason Chica looks like this. So we have direct and indirect evidence that Jeremy is the reason that Roxy and Chica look like that in Ruin. What about the other two? Well, I'll be totally honest, we really have zero information on Monty or Freddy going into Ruin in Help Wanted 2. But we do have some logical assumptions we can make for Monty. We know from Cassie that Bonnie was Cassie's dad's favorite animatronic, and I'm gonna be so real, guys. If you still don't think Monty is the one that destroyed Bonnie, I think you're coping. Like, it's valid to think other things, but if you don't think it's possible that Monty was the one that destroyed Bonnie, I mean, like, we literally see Bonnie's head got caved in with a bowling ball, and in Bonnie Bowling Help Wanted 2, when you get a gutter ball, there's a Bonnie bowling ball that gets crushed by a Monty bowling ball. Like, at this point, it feels canon. It feels confirmed. It technically isn't, but it feels confirmed. Not to mention, if that's true and Monty was the one to destroy Bonnie and Cassie's dad knew, when Cassie's dad sees Monty at the end of Security Breach when he's this weird, pitiful heap, he might have taken some revenge on Bonnie, avenged him a little bit. That's why Monty looks so demolished when it comes to Ruin. And like, that's possible, but again, there's no evidence for that, it's just a logical conclusion. But then, what about Freddy? And honestly, this one's kind of a loose end. After all, the only time we see him at all in Help Wanted 2 is in Cold Storage. And in that minigame, he's perfectly normal. He doesn't even look like he does at the end of Security Breach. For now, honestly, the only answer I can think of is that Freddy does escape with Gregory at the end of Security Breach, and is then replaced with an older model, explaining the prototype stamp we see in Ruin. Especially if Jeremy was the one to beat the Princess Quest 3 arcade machine, then we know this ending didn't happen the way we saw it in Security Breach, explaining some of these inconsistencies. But speaking of those inconsistencies, what about Vanny in all of this? She's an interesting case to be sure, because on one hand, the Security Breach Princess Quest ending shows that Vanessa is freed, but then on the other hand, there's Vanny graffiti all over Ruin, and we see her at the end of Help Wanted 2. So there is the chance that the Princess Quest 3 arcade machine didn't destroy Vanny at all. But we do know from Ruin that this was the one ending that doesn't come from Gregory's mind. So what gives? Well, what gives might be B7-2, Vanny, and the way that the Mimic 1 program functions. This video is already going to be long enough, so I'm not going over the full plot of B7 and its sequel. Frankly, there's plenty of reasons why I don't want to, but this is one of them. Something about having a cat is you're never sure if they've got like a weird scab or if they have a tick or something. It's a weird scab. The important thing to note, however, is that in B7, a robotic persona was forming inside the mind of the main character, and by the beginning of B7-2, that robotic persona was separated from him. Everything that he was while the persona was a part of him was sanctioned off into this new entity, an entity that needed and craved a host. It tried to get the main character to host it again, but was denied. Do you see where I'm going with this? What if it's not that beating Princess Quest 3 destroys Vanny, freeing Vanessa, but rather it frees Vanessa by separating her from Vanny? After all, it seems likely that Vanny is just a manifestation of the Mimic 1 program inside of the mind of Vanessa. So it's not necessarily that Vanny is a character, but rather Vanny is the manifestation of the Mimic 1 program replicating within someone's mind. If that's true, whatever was left of Vanny is likely trying to find a new host, and that program resides in the VANNI mask. That same mask that our character, Jeremy Fitzgerald, Cassie's dad, picks up and uses for Help Wanted 2. Maybe Vanny was testing out Jeremy as a host, but instead decided to go after Cassie. Realistically, that's a full theory for another day, but for now, this could explain why Vanny is still around after the Princess Quest 1 through 3 machines are beaten, yet still allow for the Princess Quest ending from Security Breach to not be canon. So again, what is the canon ending of Security Breach? Well, one other detail that might shed some light on that answer can be found at the end of Ruin. A detail that always kind of didn't make sense to me. Gregory's labeled backpack in the room right outside of the Mimic. Now, this scene in insulation makes sense, right? We have a collapsed ventilation shaft, a cemented over door, empty cement bags, and a backpack labeled Gregory. This scene very easily explains, hey, Gregory went in there, somebody cemented the door behind him once the Mimic went in after him, he snuck out through the vent and collapsed it on the way behind him, trapping the Mimic in this room. The problem is, when did this happen? Gregory does not have that backpack in Security Breach, so it couldn't have happened during the game. Logically speaking, it would have had to happen before or after Security Breach. And after doesn't make a lot of sense because pretty much every ending deals with Gregory getting the hell out of there. Why would he immediately go back in and to the depths of it afterwards? So then if it's not after, what about before? And that does make a lot of sense. If we lean on GGY being close to the game's timeline continuity, then Gregory would have at some point also been subservient to the Mimic 1 program just like Vanny. Click this video if you want the full big breakdown on why that's possible because we do not have time to recover those grounds. You know, just thinking of it now, if Gregory and Vanny were working together before the events of Security Breach, I wonder if this line from the trailer,
"You will bring me what I want, and if you fail me, then you will, both of you, burn!"
was actually talking to Vanny and Gregory, because both of you is still a weird line. Regardless, their goal within Security Breach is to bring Glitchtrap into the physical realm, and if they went down to the FNAF 6 location and encountered the Mimic, well, that presents a problem. Sure, the Mimic is a good potential candidate for a body for Glitchtrap, but if the novels are to be believed at all, the Mimic, the physical Mimic, is incredibly violent and very hard to work with. It might have been decided that that was too much of a liability, not an asset, and instead, Gregory and Vanny were the ones to trap the Mimic in that basement. Which would mean Gregory doesn't have to come back to the Pizzaplex at all after Security Breach, but subconsciously he would know the image and location of Burntrap. So yeah, I accidentally gave evidence that both the Burntrap ending and the Princess Quest ending aren't necessarily proven to be true. So for the last time, which one happened? And at this point, honestly, I think kind of both. But as far as what we see on screen, the Burntrap ending. If Jeremy truly is the one to modify the animatronics from the end of Security Breach into what they look like at the beginning of Ruin, and beat the arcade machines including Princess Quest 1 through 3, then the Princess Quest ending is redundant. Not to mention that that ending in the way we see it doesn't necessitate all the Glamrocks to be destroyed, just 2 out of the 3. Meanwhile, the Burntrap ending necessitates all 3 are damaged and Freddy goes missing. If Jeremy is still there, working for Fazbear using the Vanny mask, he might have tried to repair the Pizzaplex by replacing Freddy with that older prototype model. In that Burntrap ending, the Tangle scoops up Burntrap and leaves, which we see in Ruin. The building starts to crumble and fall apart, which we see in Ruin. And we even get an answer for Gregory's friend. Like I said, the pronoun that he uses gets muffled. That pronoun could be a he, the friend being Glamrock Freddy, someone who would know the layout of the building. In a way, technically you could argue that both the Princess Quest ending and the Burntrap ending happen, but Gregory isn't the one to do both of them. Gregory does the Burntrap ending, but in between Security Breach and Ruin, Jeremy Fitzgerald, Cassie's dad during Help Wanted 2, completes the Princess Quest ending. So that's my answer. Funny enough, when we had all the evidence that pointed to Burntrap ending being canon way in the beginning of Security Breach, I had a hunch that it was the Princess Quest ending that was actually the canon one, and now that we have more evidence that suggests the Princess Quest ending is the canon one, I'm leaning towards the Burntrap ending. Maybe I'm just contrarian, who knows? Regardless, what do you think the canon ending is of Security Breach? I'm so curious. Feel free to leave a comment. I try to go through as many as I can.